All right. I want to welcome everybody. I got Kevin and Aldo here. Kevin is the author of Your Afternoon Mentor. And this is the first of Recycled Media's actually doing a podcast with the author. Aldo, thank you so much for putting this together. And Kevin, if you want to introduce yourself to our recycling community, go ahead.
Well, first, Nick and Aldo, I really wanted to give you my sincere gratitude for inviting me to participate in the podcast. One of the things about a book like this is to get to meet people with different industries, very talented people, very energetic people, and I would put you two in that category. So thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it. Kevin Salcido, I recently retired from a 34-year career in human resources. I worked for a variety of companies, with consumer products, retail, newspapers, and I retired after 15 years as vice president of resources at Arizona State University. Uh, One of my passions that I developed in HR was leadership development. I came across countless people that I was either involved in hiring or promoting, or in some cases sending off to other companies. And I just wanted to share my thoughts with people that are coming up, guys your age that are earlier to mid-career, as to what I saw, as to what's effective, how to get noticed for a senior job, how to transition to a senior job, and how to make a senior job last. So that was the premise of the book, Your Afternoon Mentor. Um, if I can, I'll talk about the voice of the book. Does that work for you guys?
Absolutely. Yeah. I like how you broke it into the three parts. I think that made it real manageable, like for my brain, and then I could kind of use those three parts to work on myself. But let's hear the voice of it for everybody.
Although, when I sat down, I consider myself to be at the mentor stage. Obviously, recently retiring and being a senior person for a number of years now. And I always thought it was important for people to have access to somebody who can kind of give them the straight scoop on what it takes to become noted for a senior job and to develop into a better leader. I think when we come out of school or when we, get a certification of some kind, we always think that that's all there is to know. And just having that piece of paper on the wall is going to really drive your career. But I learned that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of intangibles involved with growing your career. Some may sound superficial, but some really aren't. I've seen a lot of people disqualify themselves from senior leadership for really silly reasons. And seen some people who maybe didn't have the raw intellectual horsepower as others, just completely ascend the career ladder because they knew how to manage how others perceived them.
Give
So
us
that's
could you give me like an example or two of how someone's disqualified themselves in the
oh,
past?
absolutely. I once worked for a company. We had a senior production position open. That was a big job. It was maybe about a $300,000 a year job. And the person who was in the job moved on to another company, and his lieutenant was in the interim role. But he was a wonderful man, knew everything inside and out. But he just was, to be honest, with no other way of saying it, just a poor dresser. And he just presented himself very poorly. He was ungroomed. He looked like an unmade bed. We'd given him coaching before. You have so many skills, but what's happening is people are looking at you and making an immediate evaluation as to
Yeah.
whether you are the material or not. And he just wasn't. And he didn't really show any energy to refine that piece of his persona. And consequently, senior management basically said, we have no choice but to go outside the company because we can't put this person in front of our board.
So he had the
Kevin,
skills, and you talked about this in the book. And that's what I liked about the book too. You kind of had like a relatable story for each point you were making. So he had the definite skills and the ability. And unfortunately, in the society we live in, perception is reality. People perceive you on your first appearance, and you're able to change it. You can change that perception, but unfortunately, like in a role like that, you do have to come across as, as that guy or girl.
Exactly. People, our brains are wired a certain way, Nick. We're wired to perceive whether somebody's friend or foe. It goes back to our days when we lived in caves. And so consequently, people draw immediate conclusions about others within just a few seconds. I see you guys nodding your heads. We all do it. We do it all day, every day. And Sometimes those perceptions are actually pretty accurate, but sometimes they're not. So what you want to do in a professional setting is always make sure that you're giving your first impression as positively and as forcefully as possible when you're around people who can help you access higher roles in career.
Kevin, clearly the book is around mentorship and mentors. Can you recall a mentor that make a difference on your own career as you
Oh,
were like gradually climbing the corporate
oh,
ladder?
absolutely. I was working in a frontline HR role at a nuclear power plant west of Phoenix here, and we had hired a new vice president of human resources. He was about 15 or 20 years older than me, and we both got hired about the same time. And for whatever reason, he kind of took a shine to me. He was Hispanic, I'm Hispanic. Maybe he saw a little bit of himself in me, and he kind of adopted me as his guy. And he positioned me for 3 other jobs in my career. So he was such a strong sponsor of me that whenever somebody would call him, he was very well connected. Somebody would call him, hey, we're looking for a senior role here at this company. My name would be the first one he would offer up. And he did that for me 3 times. So that's the power of mentorship. And I still see him. He's a wonderful guy. I saw him at a holiday party not too long ago. So I tell people, and I read about this in the book, you have to find 2 or 3 power mentors, people that they're not only good at what they do, but they also have contacts in the industry, contacts in the company, contacts in the community. And you want people like this out there advocating on your behalf.
That goes into networking, which is, as we know, that's a very important part of any career, networking. And
it's something to do. There's some are introverts and they don't like it, and it's fine. But from a practical standpoint, the broader your network, the broader your possibilities and opportunities.
Yeah, very true. Kevin, question for you. On chapter 13, you talk about resiliency. Nick and I both own our own businesses, and Nick is in the process of launching and managing several other businesses as he expands his outreach as well. What is your advice for those entrepreneurs who read your book and it comes to resiliency, not just in the workplace, but as an entrepreneur and driving a business in today's environment?
Oh, that's a great question. Again, one of the things that I've found from very successful people like you guys, entrepreneurs, I like to read historical biographies. Is sometimes you get to a period in your life where you just have to grind. You just have to grind, and maybe things are going against you, and it's easy to just kind of say, "That's it, I'm done." But the people who stick with it and the people who keep on grinding, they're the ones that are going to be successful. I hike a lot, and sometimes you come to what's called a false summit. You think you're at the top of the mountain. Nick, you know what this is. And then you get to the top of the mountain and you see another range of mountains ahead of you. So
I hike a lot too. So that's a good way to look at it.
Sometimes you have to take a deep breath and say, well, I'm not there exactly where I thought I was going to be. And
you have to ask yourself, and this goes to business and hiking. You're in the middle of like a 12-mile hike, pretty grueling. I usually have weight on my back because I like to make it more miserable for some reason. Sometimes in the middle of it, I'm like, why am I doing this? And then sometimes in day-to-day business in the recycling world, I'm like, why am I, getting my ass kicked every day?
But the funny thing is that when you come out the backside of this, sometimes the grinding was fun. I mean, most of the time it was when you look back on it, maybe not when you're in the middle of it, but when you go back, there's a strong sense of accomplishment that I was pretty happy with the challenge, and I just kept grinding. So
the journey is always the fun part, and that took me a while to realize. Like the finish line's not the fun part; it's getting there.
Oh, you're right.
Right. And that's why I think most entrepreneurs, management type mindsets, they're always looking for a new finish line. They're not happy when they get I got that goal done. Now it's more like what's next, because then you got a new grind. So
and that's a very important personality characteristic, especially for entrepreneurs. You have to be able to enjoy the grind. You have to be able to have the sense, okay, I made this goal. Now what's next on my list? People who do that, people who approach life with that mindset, they're the ones that are really going to be successful. So I always encourage people to be persistent. Whether it's you're starting a business, you think your growth is going to be linear and ever ascending, and we all know it's not. It's a zigzag. Same with your career. Sometimes you go up, you go down, you go up, you go down. But the key is to always be going up as you're having these zigzags, and to appreciate the fact that you may be standing in the valley today, but 2 years from now, what's troubling you will be afterthought because you'll be onto something else.
The book emphasizes a lot building teams. I wonder, Nick, like you have these various businesses, and every single one of them is very different in makeup. So what do you look, and how do you manage that as you're building these very diverse teams for different approaches that you have?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing in building a team is you have to understand what your own strengths and your own limitations are. I don't like to say this, I like to say limitations. So in the book, I encourage people to do things like personality tests, do an MBTI or a DISC. These are kind of acronyms.
I wrote those down. That's on my to-do list because I've never done that.
Find them online. It'll tell you what you like and what you don't like. For example, I worked in human resources. I didn't like process. I didn't like detail. So I understood that was my deficit. So I always made sure I was hiring people with maybe more of a detail mindset than I do, or more of a process mindset than I do. So the number one goal is to understand what your gaps are so you can have people fill those gaps. And so that's one thing I always look out for. Is I need somebody who can help me in this part of my, psyche that I'm not strong in. And then after that, you're almost becoming like the coach of a baseball team. I get the baseball team analogy in the book, and you just have to be able to assess the broad array of skills that you need to be successful, and you need to almost like draft. I need a catcher with a strong arm, or you need to trade. I need a left fielder, who can hit 290. So it's a continual assessment and reassessment of the skills that you need in your organization.
When I grew up playing team sports, so like relating it back to team sports is always something that our team kind of does, because it's very applicable. You build a team, and like although it said, we own multiple companies that do different types of things, and we're really blessed to have such a great team. But it took us years and years and years of cultivating a good culture, building a team, going through lumps, finding the right people that add to our team that fit within our culture, because it's not for everyone what we do.
Let me ask you, Nick, what attributes or what kind of, I guess attributes were you on the lookout for as you were building your team? What did you look for?
I'm more looking for just people that have the right mindset and are positive, that have the right grind, rather than any like set of necessary skills. Because anyone that's got that can learn the skills. So I don't necessarily hire for that. I've done it the other way where like this guy's really polished. He came from maybe a big corporation, and we're still in all grand scheme of things, we're a small business, and I'm proud of that. Because we're nimble, we're quick, and our people need to be nimble and quick too, and roll with the punches. And I think most people in recycling are from typically a smaller company. So, you got to be quick. You got to make decisions quick, So, like, I hire for attitude.
How about you, Aldo? Yeah, those are all great comments. Think about you, Aldo.
Yeah, you can always try to teach the skills, but the grind and the desire and the drive is at least not something that you can readily give somebody, for sure. I have a question for Nick, because this was an interrupted chapter for me in the book. The leadership transition for you, Nick, as your business grows and changes and evolves. How have you seen that transition like within yourself? Because I imagine that as the business grows, you utilize different skills, or you utilize different people. How does that evolution has taken place with you?
With our companies, it goes back to like we're finding the right people with the right attitude, and we'd like to promote within. When I started here in 2010, I started at the bottom, And I'm not saying that in a negative way, but that's where I started. I started entry level and I just grinded. I saw opportunity. I knew the ownership. I believed in them, and we're looking to grow it the same way, so where I want to pay that forward. And you kind of talk about this the very end of the book, Kevin. Like I try to take that time with people that want to grow. And one thing that I've been would help me be successful in my career, I was quite vocal with Brett. I'm like, Brett, I want to do your job, and he's like, well, what am I gonna do? I'm like,
Yeah.
you can go golfing. He's like, I don't like golf. I want to still do my job. But he knew like I wanted to do more. So I'm looking for the same people that come to
But
me.
yeah.
I want to do more. And I want to, and I wrote this in here because I'm always trying to be better. I'm like, I need to spend more time with those guys to help make them better leaders. So I don't like golf either, but so I can,
I
do less and they can do more and I can do different things.
Yeah, well, Nick, you hit a great point because I always tell people too coming up, if you could make your boss's job easier, you are golden. And part of that is just number one, being a positive presence,
Mm-hmm.
not taking a lot of his or her energy on negative stuff, coming to the boss with a problem, but also with solution to the problem, not just dumping it onto all those devs because they hear, oh, they'll figure this out. Well, all those answers should be, well, it's kind of hard for you to figure that out. So, I always tell people if you're positive, if you're part of the team, if you act like a team member, if you bring solutions along with problems, and maintain this whole area of being sociable and easy to connect with, your career really has no limits.
I I read the book 2.5 years ago, and I was on a big job transition, trying to figure out what I wanted to do in the future. A few of the chapters came very timely. I wrote you a review back then.
Good, I appreciate
I, I have enjoyed the book, and I got to say kudos to you for. I was a bit skeptical in the beginning when I started reading it from somebody on HR with 30 years, and uh, I was pleasantly surprised not to take the approach, or the book taking the approach of like an HR manual kind of situation. Um, so it was very simple to read, very very timely advice. I really appreciate the read, and I got to say it was really helpful clarifying things that I wanted to do in my professional career as well.
Well, I appreciate that. And that was kind of my goal, was to make it to be very easy to read. I avoid HR buzzwords. I avoid diagrams. I think there's one diagram in the whole book. I want things to be actionable. And again, the premise of the book, your afternoon mentor, is, if you sat down with somebody you admire, what would you want them to tell you? You guys will be in that role if you're not already in that role. Is Nick, how did you get to be where you are? Although I respect what you've done with your business, how do you do it? So it's kind of a pay it forward situation. I'm mentoring those because I had what I would consider to be a very successful career. You guys have successful businesses, and I'm always big about paying it back. And because another thing too, let's not be kid ourselves. Is there's a little bit of luck involved with some of this. You have to meet the right people at the right time, and you have to have the ball bounce your way a few times. So there's external factors at play. But if you can cover the basics of what it takes to be a strong team member and a good leader, the opportunities come your way.
I agree
Awesome.
that there is some timing, luck, but that only goes so far. I think if someone out there that maybe thinks their luck's not on their side, I tell this to people in our own companies. I'm like, if you don't have to come here. Same with if you're stuck somewhere you're just truly unhappy with. I understand you have bills. Look for that next opportunity. But I also think if that ball's not bouncing your way, the cream of the crop really does kind of rise eventually. It might take a little more time. Maybe you don't align like you hint on in your book, Kevin. Like maybe you don't align with those owners, those senior management, because you don't have those commonalities. But regardless, if you're a producer and you're positive, they'll notice. It might take more time, but they'll notice.
Yeah, and and to your point, Nick, I came across people who were just did not fit. And there was no harm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I talk, it's like a relationship. Sometimes you date, you're in love, and then one day you wake up and you're not in love anymore. That doesn't mean anybody's bad or anybody's evil. It just means it's time to move on. And that's part of this part of self-knowledge that I talk about a little bit in the book is know who you are and know where you need to be. I guess another thing I'll say too is people need to learn. If you're talking about grinding and resiliency and career success over time, you need to learn from your mistakes. We all make them. I could sit here and talk about many mistakes I made over the years. You make a mistake once, it's a mistake. You make a mistake 3 times, it's a pattern. And people who don't understand, who continue to make the same mistakes, again, they're limiting themselves too. So I didn't mean to put a negative slant on it, but I'm just saying everything that happened that was not optimal, that you did not think was the best thing for you. It's always time to take a step back and look objectively at the situation and say, okay, what happened? How did it happen? How did I contribute to it? How could I have avoided this? And take those learnings and move on to your next opportunity.
Kevin, what do you think what would you say the last 2 years that you have seen the HR as a full spectrum? What has been the most positive, in your point of view, change in the workplace as it relates to, people, technology, skills? I know you have worked for very different companies, the different approaches that you have seen, and any tools that entrepreneurs like Nick and Aldo can grab from those.
Well, I would say there's 2 things that I've noticed. Of 2 main things is I think there's more diverse voices in leadership than I used to see. I started in the corporate life back in the early 80s. And, back then there was only a certain type of person who ran a business or ran in an executive suite. And I've seen many, many more diverse voices in the workplace than that. And to the power that I think it's a positive, when I started, most women work in find administrative roles, and now there's a lot of female CEOs. Mm-hmm. And that's just how much that has changed. So I think that's a general part. I think the culture is more accepting to different types of people ascending and different types of people being successful in business. So that's a very positive thing. Another thing too is I would say, and I think you guys get this, is, again, leadership used to be very top down, hierarchical, do as I say, be at your desk, blah, blah, blah. And I think that whole thing's kind of been flipped on its head. I think good leaders now understand that they're not on top of the pyramid, but they're at the bottom serving those who work for them. So I think the whole concept of kind of servant leadership as opposed to dictatorial leadership, that's been a big mind shift I've seen in my 30 years in working the day. And it's the right mindset, by the way.
I agree. I think the first time I heard the term servant leadership was Dave Ramsey, some of his leadership stuff, and that really hit home for me. That's like kind of my first intro to like leadership training, and then it's kind of led me, now it's led me to you. I've read some Ryan Holiday, Gary Vee. I think different perspectives are good. Try by Sebastian Younger. There's just so many variables that all kind of connect together, and yours was a refreshing approach to it.
Yeah, I think that's a very positive way of approaching it. It's been a great evolution. So,
you talk about authenticity, and these days it can seem that things in social media, especially, have this veneer of like everything is good. You talk about challenges on your book, how to work through them, and advice for young people coming into the workplace to embrace challenges and learn from mistakes. What have been some of your mentorships advice to you as you have dealt with setbacks or disappointments or challenges in your career?
Well, that brings up a very interesting concept. Again, I would encourage your listeners and your friends and your colleagues to learn more about. It's this whole concept of emotional quotient. It's called EQ. There's EQ it's a combination of how you view yourself, how well you understand yourself. We already talked about that earlier. It's an understanding of how others are perceiving you. I think people who are very self-aware have a strong sense of how they're being perceived by others, especially in the moment. It's how to manage your emotions as you're experiencing them. We all get a little frustrated. We all, feel like kind of sucking it all in at a certain point in time. But people who can manage their impulses and their emotions, they're going to be a little bit more successful. Motivation, self-motivation. We talk about, uh, you know, loving the grind. It takes a special type of person to love the grind. And just part of it being social. There is a saying in human resources I used to use all the time, and that is your skills may get you hired, but your personality may get you fired. So part of it is just understanding how to interact with people. So those are the elements of authenticity that I'm always reminding people: know who you are, understand how you're being perceived, know what motivates you, and understand the importance of being the kind of person that can get along with others.
Hmm.
One thing you talk about in your book is separating your personal life,
Yep.
and your work life. I guilty of not doing that at all. Mine's kind of like this, and I make it work. But I do think it made me kind of have to self-reflect on that. But are you pretty adamant keeping them separate? And why is that?
Well, I would say from a mental health standpoint, we need to have time to check with ourselves. And I was as guilty as the next guy in my prime years of my career. I remember coming home from a tough day at work and having my kids kind of yapping at me, "Hi, Dad, hi, Dad, hi." And my mind's at work. And
Yeah.
so guilty about that. We've all done it.
Oh yeah, I've done it,
Uh,
and I need it, and I try to be better about that. I've done it, and it does upset my family, so I try to. That being said, like I try to be present in each
exactly. That's
situation.
great. And part of it is these things here where there are leashes now. These phones, I'm holding a phone. There are leashes, and we cannot. It makes it very difficult to separate the work from home. So whatever strategies you need to do, either turn it off for 2 hours or say no phone for the first hour when I get home. Or
I use
uh,
the focus. I personally use when I get home, my phone knows I'm home, and it turns into like home focus.
yeah,
So I don't get any phone calls. I don't get any
that's a great option.
notifications unless you call twice. If you call twice in a row, then it comes through because then it might be. So I've told her,
Yeah.
like, if you need me, they go straight to voicemail. Call me back if it's important. So
So part of it is that's a great strategy. Part of it's just work life, mental health balance. I mean, there is a certain time you mentioned like hiking, Nick, when you have to disconnect and uh, I'm going to go out and enjoy nature. I'm going to go out and hike. I'm going to go on vacation. I'm going to go play golf. I'm going to go see a movie. We have to disconnect because otherwise, you start losing objective. You start taking on tunnel vision, and you start ignoring what's happening around you because you're so focused on something that's happening forward. And I would tell people, what's keeping you up at night tonight, you won't even remember it a year from now. So why are you giving it that much control over your emotions and mind and your sleep? So part of it is finding that work-life balance and finding outlets, whether they're hobbies. I like to hike and golf and do a little woodworking and go to the gym a lot. And you just need to be able to find those outlets. If you don't have an outlet, I would encourage you to find one because we all need to use a different part of our brain than we use at work. And we all have to have something that takes total focus away. Because like if you have a hobby that you really enjoy, then you're focused on your hobby. And the last comment I'll make on that, guys, is your identity. Maybe not so much for an entrepreneur. I have to confess, I never had the entrepreneur experience, although I respect it immensely. Your job can go away. So your job can go away as quickly as a phone call from HR on a Monday morning because we're going through downside. So if you are not ready for that moment, it can be very jarring. So I always remind people that, what you do is not who you are. And so you need to make sure that you have that kind of mindset. Okay, well, it's not my total definition of who you are. I was a VP of HR at a big university. And it was a big part of my identity. And I realized that one day when I wasn't that anymore, there were other ways I was going to have to fill that gap. And I was very planful about it as I approached retirement. But people always have to realize, especially in an organization, loyalty only goes one way. So if you are totally invested, mind, body, and soul in your position, you may be setting yourself up for disappointment. So it's important for you to have a variety of things that make up your identity.
It makes for a healthy balance. Always one that we trying to strike a combination of. I do gotta say that's a great point that you just made, because I have had the opportunity to work as an entrepreneur for myself, building a company. I can relate to Nick, but I also work for a large company as well, and it can be pretty tunnel vision before you know it, that your identity is almost like one belongs to the other one. It can be pretty challenging even from a professional standpoint, as well.
So again, I'm not saying I did it right over my whole career. I made as many mistakes as anybody else. I wrote about it in the book, but one of the reasons I wrote the book is so I could just kind of share these things with others who are in that case their careers. Mm-hmm. Just things to think about.
And I do think you discuss like how to keep yourself sharp in that third part. Health wise,
yeah,
how you eat, and that's something that I'm in my 40s now. I have to be very mindful of how to keep myself mentally sharp, and that's getting to the gym and eating better. I'm not perfect at it, but like that's something I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people don't discuss how important that is. And I think that's arguably like one of the most important things you can do, because if you're not ready physically and mentally, you're doing your team a disservice.
Yeah, nobody's winning. Your relationship is suffering, your work is suffering. So absolutely, Nick. The point I mentioned in the book is as we age, because you go from your 20s where you have boundless energy to your 40s, now your body's changing and your hormonal balance is changing, your metabolism is changing. You have to adapt. And what worked for you in your 20s is not going to work for you in your 40s. Mm-hmm. Whether it's the consumption of alcohol, I used to be like my beer like anybody else, but I've noticed as years have gone by that it affects me differently. It's watching what you eat. It's make sure you can eat plenty of sleep. It's again making sure that your relationships are positive, because toxic relationships will sap you. So all those things that you have to be kind of mindful of as you move through your prime years of your career.
I like it that you call it prime years. Thank you for that.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of fun. I encourage guys your age, you guys are your 40s, 50s, just enjoy the ride, man. Because one day you're going to get to the finish line, like I did a year and a half ago, and you want to be able to look back. Hey, I had a great time. It was positive. I met great people. I had great experiences. I made my mistakes, but I learned from them. And there's a great deal of satisfaction when you do reach that finish line and your life could transition into something new. So I just want to make sure I could help guys like you understand. Just enjoy the ride.
Cool. Well, I'm still having fun. I'm still.
Yeah. Well, you guys look great. You guys both look healthy and happy and very.
Well, thank you. I got a question for both of you guys. I'm gonna copy a line that I've seen lately about this guy asking people in the street about if they could have a conversation with their 20-year-old self, what would one advice they would give their 20-year-old self about life in general as it relates to family, profession, careers?
You go first, Aldo.
All right. If I would give myself the 20-year-old advice, I would say to be more vocal about my desires and things that I wanted to accomplish. I think that looking back at it, maybe a cultural component to my upbringing was not to be as vocal as I could have been. I think that's the one that I would definitely give myself.
How about you, Nick?
I tell myself to get up at 5 a.m., get in that routine then,
right,
and do that. Focus on my health even back then more, get in that routine, because I didn't, and I am now focused on that. I was pretty vocal in my 20s. It kind of helped me. And I would say just, maybe focus on my kids are older now. Maybe focus on them a little more in my 20s. That's what I tell myself. So that goes back to you, Kevin, saying keep the family and the work separate. And my wife would probably be nodding her head that I'm guilty of not doing that. I need to work on that. Okay.
Those are all great things. Yeah, I guess if I have to look back, the things I regret the most are relationships that I could have done a better job managing. Okay, so that as human beings, we always think it's the other person's fault. They're not getting me. They don't understand me. Blah 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 blah. But as I said earlier, empathy, understanding that the other person's point of view, and understanding how they see the world is not necessarily the way you see the world, and to be respectful of that. So when I've made mistakes over my career, it's probably because I thought my worldview was the only worldview, and that's not correct. I mean, it's just not correct. Everybody sees the world through their own lens of experience, and whenever I made the mistake, it's because I wasn't respectful.
Wow, that's great advice.
Awesome advice. I wanted to offer, when we put this newsletter out, please make a comment, message me. I want to send some of these free copies out to some of our subscribers and our listeners. So hit us up, and I'll send some copies to some of the recycling community, because I think our community is really unique and cool, where we all kind of work together. And I think, this book could help a lot of people. So I want to put that out there real quick.
Well, I appreciate you guys giving me the time this morning, and I'm again thrilled that I've made 2 more contacts in my network. And I'll put this out there too. Whoever winds up with the book, if there's a comment, a question, my contact information is in the book. Just ping it to me. I love answering questions online or LinkedIn connections, or we can engage. I'm not going to charge you $250 an hour. That's not who I am. I'll just say, consider this. You thought about that? Again, my whole purpose of writing the book and doing things like this podcast, just giving back some knowledge. So,
awesome. That's awesome.
I'm available.
That's great. Great stuff.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for taking the time, and we'll get this out to all our subscribers here soon.
I appreciate it again. Thanks again, Nick and Aldo.
Thank you, Nick, for hosting. Thank you, Kevin, for joining us.